Hi there, it's Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, the Money Coach again. I'm the co-founder of AskTheMoneyCoach.com and Money Coach University. Have you ever been in the running for a job and then it came down to talking about salary and the employer wanted you to put a number first? Maybe you didn't know what to say. Maybe you froze. Maybe you kind of threw out a ballpark figure. Maybe you just felt like, I should have let them make the first, offer and put a number on the table. Well, let me give you some guidance around salary negotiations specifically and how you can use something that I call the 5% range rule to always get what you want, okay? First of all, when it comes time to throwing out that first number, you need to know that most employment experts, most negotiation experts tell you to hold back on offering a number or not talk about salary at all until you formally get an offer. They don't want you to prematurely engage in a conversation because of a couple of reasons. One is you want to get the employer vested in you. You want them to spend as much time getting to know you, to understand you, to appreciate the value that you bring to the position. And frankly, the further enmeshed they become with you, the longer you can keep them engaged with you, the more they're inclined to give you a stronger, more aggressive offer. And frankly, to forget about anybody else who might be in the running. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to say a number. You're going to have to say some amount of money that you want. And some people think that he who speaks first loses, but I don't really necessarily agree with that strategy. I think that there's always an opportunity in a salary negotiation to get to a win-win, to get to where there's mutual agreement and mutual satisfaction. You may not get exactly 100% of what you had hoped for, but I'm going to tell you about my 5% rule, my 5% range rule in a minute, just to get you definitely way, way, way closer probably than you've ever gotten before. But you also need to know why it is that, again, employment experts say, let the employer make the first move. Or some might say, it's okay if you do it. It's all about what's called the anchoring effect. The anchoring effect, simply put, is a way to frame a number in somebody else's mind based on a first or an initial number being put on the table. And it's not just in salary negotiations. It's in a whole host of things. For example, if you were driving around in a neighborhood and you saw a for sale sign outside of a house, and it was a beautiful, nice, gorgeous house, but you happen to be in a neighborhood that you really didn't even know home values, right? And let's say it was a Sunday afternoon and there was an open house going on. And on a whim, you went and said, let me go look and see what this house looks like inside. So you went inside, there was a real estate agent, you know it's obviously for sale, but you really have absolutely no idea how much this house costs. Is the house $350,000, $500,000? Is it a $700,000 house? Well, the real estate agent, the realtor, is likely going to hand you a sheet. And that sheet is going to have the seller's asking price. The seller may say $500,000. That's my asking price. Now they've anchored or set a number in your mind about value. A $500,000 home is telling you this house is of substantial value. This house means something to me of great value. Now, again, real estate prices vary all across the country. And for illustrative purposes, I just want you to understand the concept of anchoring. That price is telling you something. There's no way you're going to get that house for $250,000, for $250,000. You're going to have to get somewhere close to that $500,000 number, or if it's a very heated market, if it's a bidding war that breaks out, you may even have to go over the $500,000 asking price if you were so inclined to make an offer on that house. But that first number being thrown out there in the real estate example, the $500,000 sets the stage and it frames in the recipient's mind, the potential buyer's mind, a whole host of things. Ditto for what happens in salary negotiations. So when an employer puts a number out there and says, this job has a salary of $60,000. This job has a salary range of $120,000 to $130,000. They're anchoring. They are setting the stage, so to speak, and setting in your mind a framework for the amount of work to be done, the value that the employer places upon that position, the skills you'll need to bring to the table in order to get a position of that comparable pay, etc. Okay? Likewise, if you happen to put out a number first, you've anchored the employer. You've set something in the employer's mind about you. You've established, or attempted at the very least, to establish or convey to the employer your value. Now, part of the problem of putting your own number out there first is that research shows that most people, even when they think they're making an aggressive first offer, they typically undervalue themselves. So frankly, I believe it's typically best to let the employer give a first offer and say what salary or salary range they were thinking of for this position. Then, after they give a number, that's when you can use what I call the 5% range rule. Now, let me tell you how this rule works. In essence, it requires you to first know your absolute bottom line, the least amount of money that you will accept in order to take this job. So let me just use a round number and say $50,000. If an employer absolutely will not get you for anything less than $50,000, and if you know that's your walking away price, or the salary at which you just cannot go beyond, below that is, then you need to have that number, of course, fixed in your head. But you don't want to, of course, say to the employer, $50,000 is my bottom line. It has to be, this is my, lowest walkaway number, kind of take it or leave it. You definitely don't want to go with a take it or leave it proposition, nor do you want to come to the employer from a negotiating standpoint with your lowest number. So what should you do? In my opinion, it's always better not to throw out a single number, but to throw out a range, 5 to 10% or so range. And then you also bump that number up by 5%. So here's how that works mathematically. Let's assume again, your bottom line number is $50,000. Bump it up. Do not go with a range that starts at $50,000. Bump it up by 5% in terms of the minimum number that you convey to the employer. Now, this is an art. This is part of the negotiating strategy. Let's do the quick math here. 10% of $50,000 is $5,000. So 5% of $50,000 is $2,500. So you want to start with $52,500. That would be the low end of the range that you offer to an employer. Now you can go up another 5 to 10% or so. If you went up another 5% on top of that, you'd be adding, another $5,000, potentially more, right? And it doesn't have to be exactly in a percentage terms, but in terms of the bump up, I definitely recommend that you always go 5% above your lowest acceptable offer, okay? Then when you look at the range that you're going to tell the employer, it can be a dollar range or a percentage range. But in this example, let's say you said, I was thinking if the employer offered, for example, $48,000 or maybe even $50,000, you might counter with something like, given my background and skills and the expertise that I'm going to bring to this position, I think a more fair salary range, and what I was seeking, is in the range of $52,500 to $57,000. Again, you're giving the employer a reason and a rationale. You're telling them that you're bringing a certain amount of experience to the table that justifies your request, and you're opening up room for dialogue and conversation here. You've not hit them over the head, like a hammer. You've not said one hard and fast number that seems to indicate complete inflexibility. You've indicated that there's a little bit of wiggle room here. But guess what else you've done? By doing that 5% bump up and then putting your range, you've also established a floor. And the employer may say, okay, I think I can get this person, now that I know the range that they're offering, that they're willing to accept. If an employer countered and understood that for you, the lowest acceptable range was that $52,000, even if they went to that number, now you've come out ahead because you knew in your mind that $50,000 was really the lowest financially acceptable range. But you gave yourself some cushion. You gave yourself some additional wiggle room, and you conveyed flexibility to the employer. So all of these things are part of the benefits of using the 5% range rule. Very effective strategy, and it's one that can almost always get you more money. So I hope you will use this in your very next negotiation. Again, it requires you to first know what is the lowest acceptable dollar amount that you would be willing to take a job for. Again, take your pick. I use $50,000 as just an example, but for you, it may actually be $100,000 is the lowest acceptable salary. In which case, when you convey your salary range to the employer, you would start with $105,000. Got it? Because you're going to bump it up by $5,000, and then you can negotiate from there. That's part of the art of negotiating.